Hello and welcome back to Session Zero. I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. I'm very excited about this episode. We got a returning Season 1, Episode 1 OG guest back on the show. She's a cast member of Total Party Kill. She's the editor of Total Party Kill. And so many other things. I don't need to tell you more because she's here to talk about herself. Welcome back, Erika Ensign!
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be back.
It is so great to have you back. Let's just jump right in. I discovered Total Party Kill, I'm pretty sure, from you, from a tweet or something, saying, hey, here's another episode of this podcast. And I was like, Erika Ensign's on a D&D podcast? I need to consume that. And then I realized that it was, had a back catalog and multiple campaigns. And I was like, holy bagoli, what is going on here? Then later I learned that you edited it. It's just mind-boggling because you do so many projects. But we got to start from the beginning. How did you first get involved with TPK?
Well, I had become involved in the Incomparable network by being on episodes of the show and that sort of thing. And I had listened to the Incomparable, the genesis of the Total Party Kill podcast. Originally, it was just, several other people from the Incomparable being like, hey, we should play Dungeons and Dragons for an episode. Wouldn't that be a fun lark? And it was a fun lark. It was so fun that everybody decided they wanted to keep playing, but they didn't want to turn the Incomparable into a Dungeons and Dragons live play show. So it ended up getting spun off into its own feed on the Incomparable network as Total Party Kill. And it was a Dark Sun campaign run by Scott McNulty, and it was very fun to listen to. And they finished a season of that basically, and then decided to switch over and have Tony Sindelar come in as a new, well, not come in, he was part of the Incomparable, but he came into the Dungeon Masters. Yes, the chair, exactly. And yeah, so he decided to run a campaign and was like, hey, let's get some new voices in here. Anybody want to play Dungeons and Dragons on a podcast? I'm like, hello, me.
Hello, Erika,
yes.
From Wisconsin, ready to go.
Yeah, I was so excited to be able to do that because I had been in Wisconsin playing Dungeons and Dragons at an actual table with people 2 times a week, and then moved to Canada where I didn't really know very many people and had no D&D. So the opportunity to play on a podcast with a bunch of cool people that I already liked, could not pass that up. Couldn't say yes fast enough. So I created my first.
Up, please.
My first TPK character, Flessa, the jumpy, flippy, stabby, simple rogue, and just had a blast playing through that season of TPK. And then it switched over back to Scott's campaign in Dark Sun, and they had lost a couple people in the interim. And he was like, hey, Erika, do you want to create a character and play on, in this game? I was like, yes, I do. I really, really do. So, so created a character for that, and then have basically been in the mix for those 2 things, which are sort of like the tentpole, the tentpole seasons, tentpole campaigns, and have also, dipped my toe in the water in many of the other random little offshoots that they have done ever since then.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so you come in, you knock it out of the park right away with Flessa. They ask you back to be in Dark Sun. When did you then become the editor of the podcast?
I don't remember when it happened. So I know it was well into my playing days, but at some point it was it had gotten to be a lot for Jason Snell, the one who runs the Incomparable network. So he was editing all of the Incomparable flagship episodes, and he had been editing TPK and other things as well. And he was just kind of at the point where he was just like, I need some help. I need to farm some of this work out. And I edit podcasts. I mean, that was how Jason found me, was on my own Doctor Who podcast. So I was already doing that work, and he asked me, he's like, hey, do you want to pick this up as some extra work? And I may have even been between jobs at that point. So there might have even been an element of my friend needs some work. I'm going to give her some work. And I was just like, yeah, sure. Why not? And my origin story for I went to school for radio, television, and film, so I already kind of had the bug for editing. I mean, I learned video editing on a linear SVHS machine, so it's not quite the same as doing it now. Yep. They switched to Avid like the year after I graduated. Those jerks.
Did you use Video Toaster?
I did not use Video Toaster. We didn't even have that, sadly.
We had that, but it was so many generations old that there wasn't really anybody around left who knew how to use it. So we were just doing like the most rudimentary stuff and just using stupid transitions for the sake of it. And it was like, yeah, we need to do something else. And then we went to a Casablanca Avio after that, which was our first foray into nonlinear, but it was still this massive box hard drive thing. And I ended up buying one for myself. Kyle Anderson and I bought one in college, and he was like halfway through editing this short film that he'd written and directed, and it just completely died. And he lost everything.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. And then we're like, I think we need to go nonlinear now. I think we need to get something better, perhaps computer-based.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I know those nonlinear days, and I'm very glad they're gone. Oh, yeah. What if this were like terrestrial radio, and you had to like get tape from people? I don't think podcasts wouldn't exist.
That's scarier than any D&D monster.
So you got the background.
Mm-hmm.
You may or may not have needed the gig at the time. Mm-hmm. Do you do all of TPK? Did you just take over the feed entirely?
I didn't. For a while, actually, I kind of did, because whatever campaign that was happening at the time, I don't remember if it was the Dark Sun campaign or the Flessa campaign, because I can't think of a better way to describe it. But whatever it was that we were doing, I just started editing that. And because I had taught myself nonlinear video editing, I've actually always edited all of my podcasts in a video editor instead of an audio editor, just because I'm comfortable with that technology. So I just delete the video track and away we go. So it was very easy for me. Actually, at first I was just doing the audio side of things, and Jason wasn't even editing down the video. He would just take basically the raw feed, and that was what would go up on YouTube. And eventually I said, hey, I'm using a video editor. Do you want me to just edit the video at the same time? So the video then, now if you go to the Incomparables YouTube page and watch any of the TPK stuff that I have edited, it's just the video version of the audio podcast. So everything is clipped out that had been clipped out from the audio version, and it's just, matches seamlessly. I don't think anybody else that edits the Incomparable does it that way, because why would you edit an audio podcast in a video editor? I'm just weird. But yeah, so it was very easy for me to just kind of take over and start doing that. So for a while, I was pretty much doing all of it because I was on every episode, and I like editing because I know what happened. I was there. So kind of the way that it's worked out is if I wasn't on an episode, usually somebody else edited that. And there were a few times where I was busy, or there was another editor who was available to do it, because Jason has some other people that he works with as well. So there are a few episodes here and there that I was on that I didn't edit. So I think the Gamma World campaign that we did, I was in that, but I didn't edit it. So I think that was Jim Metzendorf, I believe, who edited that. So I played a character who was an android, and I did a voice, but then he also when I was speaking in character, added a filter over it. Oh, it's so good. So so that good. I can't take credit for that. That was Jim's amazing work. But I have done, I would say the bulk for the last few years has been me. Although right now there is a mini episodes in White Sparrow that's airing as we record this, and I have not yet been on any of those episodes, so I have not edited any of those. Jason has been working on those, but I actually have been working on some episodes to come, because I was on them and I was like, hey, just shoot those ones my way. I'll do them. Happy to.
In the town of White Sparrow, there's a giant hand, people come from miles around to stare at that hand sticking up from the ground. Strange things and mysteries, dark magic and goblin greed. Heroes come to find glory, and this right here is one such story. Eris, Diendo, Cool Cat and Lee, Kopamasa, Karakhan and Ali, Samson, Jotham and Linnell, Femia, Krong and Wendy.
So, take us through a typical recording session. I get the impression that it's mostly Tuesday nights, because Tony likes to say it's Tuesday night. So
Yeah,
you all sit down. You're across North America for the most part. How long do you record? What's everybody? What's their setups like? Give me this dish on the whole thing.
Well, it's interesting because it differs from campaign to campaign. It sort of depends on like what we're playing. For some campaigns, it's maybe once a month for 3 hours on a Sunday. For the Tuesday night, that's the Curse of Strahd campaign, the Dog and Pony show. Yeah, we try to get together every Tuesday night and record one episode, but it varies. So one kind of interesting thing about the Incomparable Network is if you're a member, you actually, if you want, can like see and hear exactly what a recording session is like, because we put out bootlegs of the audio immediately afterward. And also they're generally streamed live. Not everything's streamed live, and that's not necessarily just for members, but you have to be available at the time that we're recording, and that's not always possible for people, especially if you're on the other side of the globe. But yeah, so we will get together on Zoom. Usually we start the live feed going pretty quickly after we get everybody online, but there's usually it's a little bit of like, okay, everybody's checking their microphones, their camera, like, oh, I'm not going to call anybody out, but you over there, are you on the right microphone? Because you sound a little boomy. Can you scratch the front of your microphone for me, please? Can you please change your settings? So like, all that kind of stuff. And even if it's not a podcast I'm running, I tend to be the one to be like, hey, check your microphone, because I'm going to have to edit it probably.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to deal with that after the fact. And once everyone is sort of in the groove there, we turn on the live stream and say, hey, listeners, and make sure that it's going out over YouTube. I don't understand the technical wizardry that has to happen to make a Zoom call with then a map and screen capture and all that stuff go out over YouTube. That Jason or Dan or somebody handles that, and it's way beyond me. Way. So that all happens, and we just, usually within 5 or 10 minutes, jump in and start playing. Tony or whoever will say, welcome to the next episode of Total Party Kill. I'm your dungeon master, blah, blah, blah. And then it's just a tabletop role-playing game for roughly an hour, and the DM tries to look for a good place to, cut it and end with a nice, juicy cliffhanger for the end of the episode.
God, you guys are so good at cliffhangers. Like, you're just going and going and going, and it's just like, the answers to these questions and more can be found out next episode. It's just like, man, lock it right in there. Yep.
Yeah, for a long time, we didn't do that. We would just, it would be 3 or 4 hours on a Sunday, and we would just play that whole time with no breaks. Like, people could get up and take a break when it wasn't their turn or something, and sometimes maybe we'd take a little bit of a break. But there was no, ending the episode, so I would have to take the entire 3.5 hour file and do math to figure out, okay, we've got this much, okay, we want it to end right around here, but we want it to be a good ending, so you don't want to drop it in the middle of a battle. So it was awful. I don't know who figured out that we could actually just do that as part of the episodes, but it has made my life a heck of a lot easier as an editor.
And you guys play in Roll20?
We do. Yep, we use Roll20 for the map. And we had tried it for the video part of it early on, and just it wouldn't hold up. It wasn't quite robust enough. So now
I've
Zoom
heard
is the way to
their
go.
video's not quite as good. So you guys have been doing this long before pandemic times. Were you early adopters of Zoom, or were you using Skype or something else?
I think we must have been using Skype early on, but we had switched over to Zoom well before the pandemic, way before that. So yeah, we were definitely early adopters of Zoom, because Zoom gives the ability to record each audio track separately as a backup, which is still not as clear audio as each person recording on their own end, which we do. But there have been so many microphone failures and so many computer crap ups that having that Zoom track as a backup, and not just for video calls. We started using Zoom for all podcast related things, even if it was just audio, pretty early on, and it has saved both Jason and I many, many hours of time.
Man, I remember doing WTF with our friend Kyle Anderson and just Zoom or Skype being so unreliable. It would cut out, it would drop out, the whole system would crash, or you'd log on and it's like, oh, you need to change your password. And you're like, what? Oh, you have to update and there's no choice. It's like, oh my God, just let me do my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the switch over was definitely helpful.
Fantastic. And then everybody just, I assume you have like a Dropbox or some kind of shared site where you send everybody your audio, and then you have the monumentous task of editing. You have usually between, I'd say, 4 and 6 cast members and a dungeon master.
Yeah, usually it's more like 5 or 6. Yep, plus the DM.
My goodness. My goodness. Yep. So then what is your approach to editing? You mentioned that you use video editing software, but as anybody who's edited anything knows, and even writers, I feel the same way, the most terrifying thing is when you open an empty program. Yeah. And you're like, okay, import all, and then you have to put it together. So what's your approach? Do you find your sync point? Just like, how do you do it?
Well, this has also evolved a bit because back in the early days, Jason would do a bunch of sort of pre-production work and just send me files that were already synced, that were already cleaned up audio-wise, that were already, had compression and EQ and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, again, The Incomparable has been doing very well, and he also has his sixcolors.com website doing reviews of like Apple products and stuff. So like he's become a busy guy. And at some point he was just like, how would you feel about doing all of the pre-production and post-production, like not post-production, but posting work? So I had been just like sending Jason an MP3 and an MP4, the video and audio, and then being done with it. And then as of, I want to say it was maybe a year ago, a little bit more, I now just get the raw files for at least for some of the campaigns. He's still doing the syncing on some of them. It sort of depends campaign by campaign.
Sure.
And from there, it's just me. I take it from the beginning to the end. So I use a program called Isotope. There are different versions of Isotope, but we have one of the heftier versions of Isotope to denoise the files. And it does a great job of taking out background noise and clicking and popping and all that kind of stuff. So I have this sort of like, when I just need to go to my Zen place, sometimes I will just find some audio files and I'll just sit down in this very chair here and I will just crank through a bunch of audio files. There's something I find soothing about it. Just like listen to a little bit of it. Okay, I'm going to select this part so it knows the room noise and I'm going to have it take that out and I'm going to listen and make sure that it sounds okay. And sometimes like these are big long files. It can take like 3 to 5 minutes sometimes for it to chug through one of the tracks, and I'll have like a game on my phone or my tablet or something like that, and I'll just play for a little while until it's done, and then I have, don't tell Jason, but I really like doing this part. It's great. I still want to get paid for it, but it's a delightful program and it works really well. And then there's also a tool that Jason gave me, and I don't know if it's a public tool or not, to automatically sync the files using basically like a baseline track. So it's not a Skype track anymore. The Zoom all call, basically. You can use that and it sort of lines everything up. And it's not perfect, but it gets it close enough that I don't have to sit there and kind of go, all right, where did everybody start talking? Because nobody starts recording at the same time on these podcasts. No.
No.
Not even close. So then I will have all of those files, which I have, exported and renamed, and they're all synced and stuff. And that's when I open up my editing program, which it's changed names over the years. It was originally like Sony Movie Studio Platinum, and now I think it might be like just Vegas Magics or something. I don't know. It's
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
It's a Sony program that is a stripped down version of Vegas. So it may not even be Sony anymore, but it has what I need because I'm not doing anything fancy with the video. I just need to be able to have as many audio tracks as I want and be able to do really basic audio stuff. I don't do anything fancy with the video for TPK. So it's just a question of, can I dissolve from the opening like title card into the video? Yes. Done. So that's the beginning, the opening credits, theme music, picture, and then I jump into editing. And importing all of those files, making sure that they are in fact lined up. The video, having a video recorded out of Zoom is a little bit tricky because it doesn't always necessarily match the synced up files, because depending on whose computer is recording that video, if there was lag on some end, things can get out of sync. So sometimes I have episodes where I spend a lot of time making sure that the video to audio sync doesn't go too far out of whack. A little bit is acceptable because it's an internet video. The Zoom call, people tend to somewhat expect that. But sometimes it's beautiful and it just stays in sync and I don't have to worry about that very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it's just the type of editing that I would do on any podcast. For D&D, I cut out rolling for initiative because that's boring. I cut out when we have to spend 5 minutes looking up a very specific rule that ends up meaning that you can't cast that spell in the first place, so it never happened.
Yeah. Yep.
That stuff just, hits the cutting room floor. And sometimes if there was something that was funny, I will occasionally take a little video clip of it that's 10, 15, 30 seconds long and put it on Twitter on the Total Party Kill Twitter feed because it amuses me.
Yeah. Or you put it at the end of the episode, which I also enjoy because we get through, the outro and we get the music and then there's this little snippet, this little Marvel bonus at the end where it's like, oh boy. And I always love it because sometimes it's behind the screen inside baseball stuff of talking about production or whatever, or it's, I think very, very rarely it's an alt of something that happened. So in the episode it happened one way, but then this little bumper at the end it's like, oh, I think we could do a little bit better or something. It's just I love it so much, and it's just this nice little treat that you throw on at the end.
Occasionally after we're done with the episode, somebody will say something that then sort of becomes canon. It wasn't part of the episode, but it was important enough to the characters that we just decided that's a thing we're going to keep. So usually I'm like, okay, these people are listening to this podcast episode by episode. If they didn't hear that, they're going to be really confused at the beginning of the next episode when Elivor has a last name Landman with 2 N's now. And that's one I don't think I actually even managed to get in there because it was just too random. But sometimes you do.
I remember when that became a thing and Tony was like, is this your name now? He's like, yeah, we decided this was my name. I was like, all right, I guess so.
Yep.
But I mean, that happens. I'm sure you're playing Zoom games that you're not recording too. But I feel like that happens even when the DM's like, all right, I'm going to call it for the night. And then you continue the conversation. You're like, blah, 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 blah. And then things will happen. You're like, okay, well, that happened in game, even though I said stop and we're keep it.
Yep.
So it's just got to be the same thing for actual plays. What are some of the shortcuts that you've come up with over your years doing it, of just I gotta do and just stuff that you can do almost automatically? Because I have my shortcuts that I use editing this show, and sometimes they work great, and sometimes we have to do the show 3 times because I forget to record things. But here we are. So, what do you do in your Vegas program?
The thing that I think saves me the most time is the fact that I edit almost exclusively at 1.5 times speed, and sometimes at 2, and sometimes even faster. Because and then that's one of the reasons that I prefer to only edit TPK episodes that I was on, because I was there, so I know what happened, and it was something that it no matter how long ago, it stays in the back of my memory at least a little bit. So
sure.
I don't necessarily need to listen to it at full speed like I would for a podcast that I wasn't on. So that saves me a ton of time. Is just having it be a little faster. So now I am tuned in to the voices of many of my friends at 1.5 times speed so well that I can recognize when something has gone wrong or when there's a background noise or something. So there's that. And my method is really just it's nice for an actual play podcast because there's not a ton that I'm taking out in terms of content. So the few things that I mentioned, those are the kind of things I would take out. And when I do that, I'm just very, hack and slash about it. Just cut all the tracks, take that out, set the ripple delete so that it will automatically move together, and then turn off the ripple delete so I don't accidentally ruin something, which occasionally has happened.
Oh yeah.
And yeah. And then just move on. And I don't even worry about making sure that the video matches up because, if you're watching an internet call, a Zoom call, people's faces judder around all the time anyway. So how do you know if it's my editing or if it's just Zoom being weird.
That is a very good point. That is a very good point.
I decided early on to not even worry about that. And then the other things I have learned to look at the audio tracks to sort of recognize, like, I can tell what's a word. I can tell, usually what's a cough or a sneeze or just weird background noises by what it looks like. And I have to edit on a huge monitor because in order to get all of those tracks big enough to be able to see what I like to be able to see, I can't do it on my laptop. There are a lot of podcasts I edit on my laptop. This is not one of them.
Not TBK. No.
Yep.
No way.
Nope. So, and then there are people whose environments I know. So it's like, okay, I know that this person has, just like a bird, Tony, in the background. And sometimes, sometimes when, if the bird's talking when Tony's talking, fine, that's going to be in the podcast because you can't cut that out. But, if it's in the middle of nothing or, Jane lives someplace where there are loud motorcycles on the street sometimes. And it's like when you see that sort of like these are things to watch for and cut out. Or if somebody just has kind of a noisy-ish background that's it's not level enough that you can just take it out with a noise gate or something easy like that, or strip silence. Then as I'm listening at 1.5 times speed, sometimes I will just go through and just and just, anytime they're not talking, just get rid of it just to be safe. And, maybe I didn't need to do that, but it was actually easier to do it all the way through than it would have been to not and miss something and have to go back and redo.
It's funny that as a podcast editor too, like I know what ums look like, and especially when I was doing the show with Kyle, and even the later iteration of What the Hell Are You Watching with Tim Bridge, you learn what everybody's speech pattern looks like. So I know what an looks like. I know what an looks like, and doing this show has been really interesting because it's so many people that I don't know, so I do need to pay more attention to it. But as they're on the show more, I know how Ted Young says I know how Jess Ayers says and it's just it's so interesting that you're just like, yep, I know that. And friend of the podcasting world and friend of mine, Ash Farbrother, once told me, he lives in London. He said that he basically learned the bus schedule of 116th Street in Manhattan from my podcast because the buses went by so frequently. He's just like, oh, it must be time for the such and such. And it's like, yeah, you're not far off. Thankfully, it's a little bit better here, but it's still, we got noisy neighbors, and you do the best you can, especially. And I think that's something that's really great about amateur, in quotes, podcasting and amateur or actual plays and stuff like that, is that you get a little bit more freedom than, we're not in a studio. We don't have, all of the stuff. We're just people who are having fun and want you to enjoy it with us. And I love that. And yes, the professional podcasts are great in their own right, but kind of ruined it for the rest of us who were trying to just have fun with our friends. Conan O'Brien.
Yeah, it is supposed to just be a bunch of people like sitting around the virtual table, and having fun playing a game. And when you're doing that in real life, there's background noises and stuff too. Like, so I don't worry overly much about making sure that I snip out like every last teeny tiny thing. But it's sort of like, where do I want to draw that line? Figure out what makes the most sense in terms of, the quality of my time and the quality of my podcasting, and make it work. And, except for the rare occasions where I have slid something literally into the wrong place. So you have like the wrong voice speaking at the wrong time, which I think I did that once, and somebody pointed it out really fast, and I fixed it, and we put it up, and everything was fine. But other than that, we haven't gotten like big complaints or anything. So I think I've found the rhythm.
You're crushing it. Let me tell you, as a fan, you're crushing it.
Thank you.
All right, wrapping up here. A couple more questions. What is your favorite and also your least favorite thing about editing the show?
My favorite thing is just experiencing the game again. There's definitely no other podcast that I edit that probably makes my spouse Steven think that I'm as loony as TPK, because I guffaw, like I genuinely laugh out loud at this podcast that I'm listening to for a thing that I was there for the first time and should have known was coming, but somehow it just hit my funny one. Sometimes I laugh at myself. It's like, that was a good joke, me, and I'm going to laugh at it, and I'm going to recognize it. So just the fact that I get to relive a really fun experience. It just makes me, it just thrills me. And then I do listen to the episodes again once they come out and drop. I subscribe to that podcast and I listen to it, and sometimes I laugh again. The third time I heard that same joke, doesn't matter, still funny, still love it. It just
still
makes
good.
me so happy. Yep.
Yeah. And what's your least favorite thing?
I think my least favorite thing is the fact that it's not portable. I can't, for other podcasts, I can take my laptop, I can kind of go anywhere. If it wasn't pandemic times, I could sit in a coffee shop or whatever and put on my headphones, sit on the couch where it's nice and cozy. But I can't do that for TPK. I really have to be in this sort of slightly more, like, professional is not quite the right word, but like down to business. I have to be in my down to business mindset. I have to have the giant monitor up, and I really have to focus. And I think, like, talking about the editing process itself, my least favorite thing is making sure the damn video is in sync with all of the voices, because sometimes that is just a nightmare. I have spent way too much time, I think. I shouldn't be quite as picky about it as I am sometimes. But I really like, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I like to have a good product out there for the viewers and the listeners. And yeah, just making sure that the sync stays is tricky.
And you always think you got it. And then 2 minutes later, you kind of zoned out. You're just listening to it. Wait, what happened? Then you have to go back and find that one spot.
Especially because I'm often, I focus so much on the audio tracks to look for those weird little noises and make sure that everything is looking as clean as possible, that I'm not necessarily paying as much attention to the video. And then my eyes will go over to the video and I'll be like, why is Tony's mouth going like this? And his voice is going like that. And, like, oops. And then, then it's just like, okay, I'll go back 5 minutes and check. Oh, it's still out. I'll go back 5 more minutes and check. Oh, okay, there. So it's somewhere in between there. And you have to sort of figure out where it was. And was it something that I did? Or was it just a weird internet thing? And if it's just a weird internet thing, then you kind of have to balance, okay, you can't move his track too much because you don't want it to be out of sync with the other people talking, but you don't want to move the video because then everybody else's voices will be out of sync because it was just Tony that was off. So there are a lot of balancing acts that have to be done when you're doing an actual play video podcast over Zoom, where everybody's video is just captured separately, or not separately, all at once. So but it's worth it. It is 100% worth it in the end, because it is a podcast that makes my heart happy.
Yes. And thank you for the work that you do. I really enjoy TPK.
Oh, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a delight. I just have one more question for you, and it ties into plugs. What are the other podcasts that you are on and that you work on?
Well, I mean, most of them are on the Incomparable Network. I guess I will start with the one that's not, and that's Verity, my Doctor Who podcast, which I started well before I even knew about the Incomparable. Still a going concern. I still edit. Well, actually, technically, I've farmed out the editing of that to my spouse, but sometimes I edit it occasionally. But I'm on it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. And yeah, so on the Incomparable Network, I do a bunch of stuff. I'm sometimes on the flagship show talking about geeky, nerdy things. Speaking of my spouse, Stephen, we do a Doctor Who podcast from our couch where we just watch every episode and talk about it very briefly whenever we feel like it. It's called Lazy Doctor Who for a reason. Lazy. I have a hockey podcast called Beginner's Puck, which is not happening a lot right now because the pandemic has just made life busy and hard for both me and my co-host. So there are occasional episodes of that come out. The other one that we are slowly working through it's called Earp Chirp. It's a Winona Earp podcast, and the maybe final season has already finished airing, and we sort of don't want it to be over, so we're going very, very slowly through that season before we finish. I just finished the saga of rereading epics, which is myself and Lisa Schmeiser from the network rereading some books from the 1970s and 80s and seeing how they hold up today. The saga of Pleistocene Exile by Julian May. And I will finish with besides Total Party Kill, the last non-Incomparable podcast network thing is the Uncanny Magazine podcast, where Stephen and I co-produce it, and I read for the podcast fantasy and science fiction, short stories, and poetry. Excellent. So yeah, lots of stuff. You're right, I'm busy.
You are a busy lady. I remember when I sent out the email, you were like, and I sent it in like late May, I think, and you said, maybe mid to late June, I might have some time. And I said, okay, I can do that.
That's how it works.
I can do that.
I live and die by
right.
my Google Calendar.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Please give us some plugs. Let folks know where they can find you online. Evergreen, because I'm not sure when these are going to come out yet. I'm actually waiting on Tony Sindelar. So whenever I can get him, then I can start dropping episodes. But let folks know where they can find you should you wish to be found.
Probably the best place is at Holly Go Darkly on Twitter. That I'm probably there way too much. I do have a blog that I've actually been updating somewhat. It's you can go to hollygodarkly.com and that will forward you to there. Mostly it's been book reviews lately because I've been reading an awful lot. But that also links to some of the other things that I do on my podcast and stuff. So you can find me on the interwebs.
I am Lincoln L. Hayes. You can find me on all the socials at Lincoln L. Hayes. You can find this show on Instagram at Session Zero D&D Show. And then you can find it at my website, lincolnlhayes.com/session0. Go there, check out my stuff. I just made a new voiceover reel because I want to do voiceover stuff, and I just got an audition for a video game, so we'll see what happens. Erika, thank you so much. Always a delight to talk to you. And hopefully when we get around to doing some of the one-shots, we can get you on there to play with us too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you all for watching, and go play some D&D. Bye!